There are several things to note about the debates. First, the cards that you're playing during the debates are coming from your campaign strategy deck. You've been building this campaign strategy deck through turns 1 through 5. So when you have your hand of cards in each of turns 1 through 5, the strategy for which card you're going to save to play to your campaign strategy deck to be used during the debate's turn, you're going to be looking at the icons in the lower left hand corner, because that's going to tell you to which issue and on which side of the issue you're going to be playing the cards. The second important thing to note is that you're going to have to keep track of which cards you have played to the campaign strategy deck and which cards you have currently in your hand for the current turn to play to the campaign strategy deck, because you want to be building your campaign strategy deck of cards such that you can win the debates in the way that you want to. The main award you get in the debates turn for winning an issue are these state support cubes that you can place anywhere on the board in any state. And this can give you an opportunity to gain support or remove the other player's support in states that you've had a hard time with during the game during turns 1 through 5. But remember that winning the first issue of the debate only gives you 2 state support cubes, while winning the last or third place issue in the debate gets you 4 state support cubes. And this is where you may save a card to your campaign strategy deck that has your opponent's candidate icon on it, because you may want to throw the first issue in the debate to go ahead and give up the 2 state support cubes to your opponent in hopes that you have more powerful cards to play to some of the other issues and win a later issue in the debate to get more state support cubes. And the last thing I'll point out that's important in the debates is that you can totally reorganize the issues track in the debates, because the first issue that's won in the debates goes to the lowest priority on the issues track. So actually in my example we started out defense at priority 1, but because the defense issue was won first during the debates, it became a lower priority for future turn 7. So that concludes the debates turn, and now you move into the 7th turn and phase 1 of the game. And remember, in turns 7 and 8, they're going to be played just like turns 1 through 5, in that you're going to go through the normal 5 phases, momentum phase, and then campaign strategy and rest phase. But when you're dealt the cards, you're going to deal a hand of up to 7 cards instead of 6 cards, as was done in turns 1 through 5. But again, you play the same 5 phases, the same momentum phase, and the same rest phase, but in the campaign strategy phase of turns 7 and 8, you're going to play 2 cards to your campaign strategy deck instead of 1. So at the end of turn 8, you're going to have 4 cards in your campaign strategy deck, and you're going to use that campaign strategy deck on the next turn, which is the last turn of the game, which is Election Day. So let's take a look at the special rules for Election Day. The first thing that's going to happen on Election Day is each player is going to contribute to the political capital bag. All of the current support on the issues go in the political capital bag. So in this case, Kennedy gets to add 1 cube and Nixon gets to add 1 cube. Secondly, all of the advertising or media support cubes on the board go into the political capital bag. So Kennedy gets to add 2 cubes for advertising in the South, Nixon gets to add 1 from the East, 1 from the Midwest, and 2 from the West. Finally, any momentum markers that you still have at the end of the game on Election Day can be traded in for state support cubes to go into the political capital bag. Right now Kennedy may have 2, so he can trade those 2 in and put 4 support cubes into the political capital bag. Nixon only has 1, so he can trade that in and put 2 cubes in the bag. Now you give the political capital bag a good shuffle, and you determine the initiative for Election Day. Initiative is determined the same way. You keep drawing from the political capital bag until you get 2 cubes of the same color, in this case Nixon. So Nixon has the initiative on Election Day. Now each player will execute their campaign strategy. Remember, on turns 1 through 5 leading up to the debates, the important thing was the 2 icons in the lower left hand corner. Well, on Election Day, the important thing is the state abbreviation in the lower right hand corner. The player who has initiative will go first, so Nixon will go first, retrieving his campaign strategy deck, and look at the 4 cards he has. So there will be 4 states that Nixon can make one last effort in on election day to try to gain support. So for example, the first card has Louisiana. So Nixon can go into Louisiana and try to tip the scales in Louisiana as a last-ditch effort. The way this happens is that Nixon gets 3 state support checks in Louisiana, the state abbreviation on the card. So Nixon gets to draw 3 cubes from the political capital bag. He only got 1 cube drawn in his color, so he can only reduce Kennedy by 1 cube. So this really doesn't tip his scales much in Louisiana. But he tries again in the other 3 states on the cards in his campaign strategy deck. And then the Kennedy player will do the same thing with his campaign strategy deck. The next thing that happens on election day is you retrieve the election day events that have been played throughout the game up here at the top of the map board in the persistent events section. So for example, this election day event says that on election day the Kennedy player gains 5 support checks in Illinois. So the Kennedy player can go to the political capital bag and draw 5 cubes in hope of gaining some support in Illinois. The last thing that happens on election day is that all of these states that currently do not have support cubes, either for Nixon or for Kennedy, has to go one way or the other and vote for one candidate or the other. The way this works is first you look for endorsement markers in the region. Remember, these were earned and played throughout the game. Nixon has an endorsement marker in the West, so all states that do not currently have a state support cube in the West gives their support for Nixon. So all of these states go to the red side and vote for Nixon. In regions such as the Midwest, in this example, where there aren't any endorsement markers in the region, that's when the color of the banner of the state box comes into play. So you look at the banner and they tip towards that way. So Michigan will tip towards the blue or Kennedy, so will Illinois and Minnesota, whereas Wisconsin and Kentucky will support Nixon. So you do that for each region, and the result will be each state will have state support cubes of one or the other candidate. And finally, the very last thing that happens on election day and the last part of the game is that you gather the electoral votes for the states that have cubes of your color. So for example, it looks like Nixon is going to get all of the electoral votes from the states in the West, while Kennedy will get the electoral votes from the rest of the states that have his state support cubes on them. So what you can do is just go to all the states where you have state support cubes of your color and collect the little state seals from each of those states, and then you just turn them over and add up the points on the state seals. There's a total of 537 electoral votes available, so the first player who takes at least 269 of them wins the game. So what do I think about this game? Well, as far as pricing goes, it retails for around $50, but you can probably get it for around $35. Even for $50, I think this game is very much worth its price. The components are excellent. As far as the components go, like I said, they're very nice. The board is nice and large. It's well organized. It's very well themed to the game with political banners and such around the borders. The momentum markers, the state seals, and the issue tiles are nice and thick, and they're very durable. The cards are also very durable, and they hold up well to repeated plays. There's a lot of information on the cards, but it's very well organized on them so that you can quickly look at a card and find out the information you need as you have your hand of cards and are deciding which card to play during the turn. Rules are very straightforward. They're very easy. The challenge comes in putting the various parts of the game together to form your strategy when you play the game. The flow of play is quick. You're just going back and forth between the two players. So you're either playing a card or you're looking at the card your opponent's playing and seeing if that event is one that would benefit you. The time it takes to play this game is about right, about around 2 hours. Once you get used to it, it'll probably come down to about an hour and a half. So that's about right for the length of the game of of this complexity. So what are my gripes with the game? Well, component-wise, my only gripe is with the state seals. And that's only as it relates to the setup of the game. So when you're setting up the game, you have to lay out each of the 50 state seals in the 50 states. And it does take some time. But on the other hand, it's very nice at the end of the game to collect the state seals from the states where you have support and just get that set of seals and add up the values. So it's very easy to see how many points you have at the end of the game. It's also nice when you're setting up the game to learn about the geography of the United States if you're not that familiar with it. The only other gripe I have with the game is in the flow of play. If you have two people that are of different experience levels, so if you have a beginner and an experienced player with this game, it's not going to be a fun play experience for both players, because the experienced player will know the cards that are out there and will be able to do much better in the game. So knowing the events on the cards and knowing when the best time to play them is a big part of the game, and as far as the strategy goes. But overall, it's an excellent game and I highly recommend it. But do I highly recommend it for you? Well, that brings us to the decision points on deciding if this is a game you would like to check out. Would I recommend this game for you? Well, it all depends on a few decision points. First of all, this is a two-player only game. So if most of your gaming sessions are with a large group of people, this game might not be for you. But if you're just playing with maybe you and one other person for most of your gaming sessions, this would be a good fit as far as the number of players that the game supports. As far as the theme, you have to think of, are you interested in a political game or a campaigning game for the United States presidential election of 1960? Is that something that you are interested in and would hold your attention for the 2 hours it takes to play the game? The third decision point would be the mechanics of the game. It's a card-driven game, so you have a hand of cards and you're playing them for points or events. It's also an area of control game where you're trying to hold on to state support in all 50 states. So you have to think about these two mechanics, and are those mechanics a way of playing a game that you enjoy? And last of all, you have to think about the weight of the game. This is a medium weight strategy game. It's more complex than Campaign Manager 2008, which I've done an earlier podcast on. Actually, my first video podcast was on Campaign Manager 2008. And that's a good starter game into this political genre of campaign type games. And if you really enjoyed that game and are looking to step up the level a notch for a little bit heavier game, then I would recommend this game. So think about those 4 decision points, and I think those will help you decide if this is a game that you should check out. Be sure to stay tuned after this decision point segment, because I'm going to take you through a turn of the game and show you how everything that we've talked about comes together, and show you how a turn of the game might go. I'll take you through all of the phases and show you the different kinds of cards that you could play and how that affects the game. If you're a first-time viewer of Board Game Review with Jason, be sure to go back and check out my older episodes. For example, I did one on Campaign Manager 2008, which is sort of a lighter version of this game. And there are a variety of games that I've done so far, and I plan to keep doing future episodes on a variety of different games and different weights. So you might find a new game to check out that you might really enjoy. To find my older episodes and keep up to date with future episodes, be sure to subscribe to my channel on YouTube. It's at BGRWJ. Also bookmark my main blog, BoardGameReviewWithJason.blogspot.com. That's the main place where I post these episodes, along with links to where you can go and purchase these games and other information for these games. You can also like the Facebook page, Board Game Review with Jason. And you can also subscribe to this video podcast within iTunes, so you'll automatically get future episodes that come out. So I look forward to seeing you next time on Board Game Review with Jason.